the slave trade business said, well, let's identify the property. Native American people. We can identify them. They just assembling the system of capitalism. This is all great stuff. But freedom to someone who is hungry, who is starving, is a meal. Liberation to someone who is homeless, that doesn't have a decent place to stay, is a safe, dry, warm place to stay. Where it's not freezing, where they don't have to worry about rats or biting their children. So the Panthers started going into the work, doing that work, feeding kids. No money, no funding, no permission. Go to a church, ask them, can you use the kitchen? Can you use the basement? Go to a community center. Go to some stores in the community, say, I want you to give a donation of food. This is no shakedown, no extortion. Give us, please, a case of milk. The person down the street is giving us a case of eggs. The person on the next avenue is giving us a case of pancake mix. If you'll give us some milk, we can feed some of the kids in this community. Most of the store owners responded. Those that didn't, we would organize. People would picket it to say you're not giving back to the community. We'd collect that food. You get Panthers, you get mothers, you get volunteers that would be there. And all it took was putting out a flyer to say free breakfast. Within a week, you'd be feeding 25 kids. Within a month, 100 kids. Within a few months, hundreds of kids. Thousands of kids, tens of thousands across the country. And then you use that to point out the contradiction, saying, if Young Panthers can figure out how to do this with no money, then what is the government doing with all this money? If Young Panthers can figure out how to open a health clinic, Dr. Harris, with no money, by having the Panther office open on the weekends and having people who are in medical school, who are doctors and nurses, come and give a few hours on their day off and bring some medical supplies and test people for hypertension and for sickle cell anemia and treat poorly treated wounds and deal with some other things. What's the government doing with all this money? If Young Panthers can figure out how to go into a building and show people how to take their money and put it in escrow and fix that boiler themselves and plug up those holes themselves and replace them with them themselves, what's the government doing with all of that money? And that's how you organize people around their common needs and around their interests and around this idea of love for community. So if you would ask myself or Dr. Harris or anybody who was back there, Sister Joanne, Sister Evelyn, to ask when we were back there, what is the number one thing that we were taught to believe in the Black Panther Party? We know you studied Malcolm. We know you studied Marx and Lenin. We know you studied Nkrumah. We know you studied Fidel Castro and Mao Zedong, the revolutionaries around the world. We know you studied those great thinkers. What is the number one thing, though, that you were taught to believe, beyond everything? And I guarantee you, we did this a few months ago, it was a year ago, where scholars from Mumia gathered at Barnard College for Mumia Abu-Jamal. They had gathered, the students had gotten together, and the scholars were on stage. The auditorium was packed with about 400 people. And I told the same story. And I didn't answer it, but the Mumia called in. And they had him on the speakerphone. I said, Mumia, this is Jamal. And he said, hey, Jamal. I said, Mumia, what's the one thing that we were taught to believe in, among all other things? And Mumia was calling for prison. He was on death row. And this was unrehearsed. And without hesitation, he answered, we were taught to love the people and serve the people, mind, body, and spirit. So our commonality in terms of struggle, brothers and sisters, whether we're talking about the anti-abolitionist movement, whether we're talking about the civil rights movement, whether we're talking about the revolutionary movement, we're talking about the Black Panther Party, is that love for people and community. And when you really have that, people can feel it. And when you really care, people can respond to it. And when you really have it, and you're that galvanizing force, the government will sit back and go, you have got to go. And that's what they did with Dr. King, that's what they did with Malcolm X, and that's what they did with the Black Panther Party. This thing on the first day, and this other idea of class struggle, of linking what's going on to us, not just in terms of the color of our skin, but to economics, is a real important thing. And I like to communicate this idea to young people when I speak, and believe me, you don't have to dumb things down for our young people. You have to talk to them and then let them know that afterwards it's going to be a conversation about what we can do now. Not just what they ain't doing. Nobody wants to hear that. Y'all are lazy, y'all stupid, y'all didn't do what they did. But rather, let me share some things that we did, and then let's talk about what you think we can do, because I know you have the best ideas for right now because you're living right now. But do understand that slavery was a business. We're clear on that, right? Yeah. It was economics. It wasn't just that they hated black folks, right? Let's be clear. The first slaves in this country were who? What color were they?
They were indentured service.
They were indentured service. They were white. They would get them right out of the debtor's prison in Europe, because back in those days, if you couldn't pay your debt, you went to jail. It wasn't like now, right? You know, this is a friendly reminder from Citibank. You all know what I'm talking about. You yell at your grandparents, don't pick up the phone, don't pick up the phone, child. There was no friendly reminders, you was in jail. And then they would come and they would say, hey, you can die in here, or you can get on that ship down the street, and we're going to take you to some place called the New World. Yeah. And, well, they may have done that too. And then when you got here, though, here was the thing. If you were white, here was the thing. Word would get out that if you could just make it away, this is before fingerprints and photographs and DNA, you know, cameras on every street corner, right? I wonder why people would do anything wrong. Because now on the news, everybody is not just that somebody snatched somebody's pocketbook, they show the guy walking with the pocketbook. And then he's looking around for a bus, like But before any of that, word would get out if you were white indentured servants. Listen, if you can make it to another city, you're good. It talks about the capitalist system of exploitation. You start using those two words, Brother Malcolm was dead within 9 months. And for the Panther Party to go out, okay, police brutality, all right, okay, feeding hungry kids, okay. But when you start talking about organizing people around economic issues, class struggles, and you're influencing the young lords and students for a democratic society, and you're linking up with the anti-war movement, and with the women's movement, and with the gay liberation movement, and with the labor movement, and people are having these mass meetings, and everybody is talking about this stuff, you have got to go. And so that led to the arrest of the Panther 21, which I was part of, and to the murder of Fred Hampton, which we talked about, to the in Philadelphia, where they raided the Panther office and made the Panthers sit naked in the cold for 8 hours in chains, to all of the Panthers, from young Bobby Hutton, who was shot in the back 17 times in California, to things that happened all the way across the country. The other thing I just want to talk about a little bit before we open up to question and answers, as it relates to the counterintelligence program, I opened chapter 1 in the book talking about how I was blindfolded and sitting on the floor of an apartment, and a Panther officer teaching me how to take an M16 apart and put it back together blindfolded. And there almost being a shootout with us and the police that night, and then getting involved in the Panthers, and this person who was my section leader, who was like my sergeant, named Yewa, this brother who I really looked up to, because I never knew my father. I had grandparents who adopted me, and my grandfather died. So for me, in that era, it was looking for a father as much as it was looking for the movement. So here was that man, you know, that was making sure that I was doing what I was supposed to do, learn the Panther 10-point program, showed me how to make pancakes for the breakfast program, showed me self-defense, showed me all that stuff, even showed me the right way to rap to a girl in the Panthers. No, I didn't know. I was in the Panther office, and a sister who looked like she was a little bit older than me came by, and I was like, hey, baby, what's happening? That sister stopped and spun on me, and she said, the revolution is happening, my brother, and I ain't nobody's baby. I was like, whoa. He pulled me to the side. He was like, Jamal, come here, let me talk to you. Panther woman got her head in trash. Panthers in Harlem and Brooklyn and Philadelphia and other places patrolling the streets without guns where it wasn't legal. But every Panther getting up early in the morning to give children food in the free breakfast program. Because in that 10-point program, we wanted an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of black people, which was point number 7. It was one point in the 10-point program. One of the things that we talk about decent education and coming back to this environment that we of learning, of books, was that we would hear, and we still hear, our children can't learn, our children are unruly, they're undisciplined. We have these lower expectations. Those of us that are parents or grandparents know that we deal with teachers and counselors, and the first thing they go is, oh, poor you. You know, We know that it's tough in your family, your grandmother's raising you, a single mother, old poor you. The Panther said, no, it's not old poor us. It's like, what is the system doing? And when we're sending our children to school to learn, how do you expect a black child who's in first grade to look at the teachers as being a Panther or police? She said, when you smoked excessive marijuana, were you being a Black Panther or police officer? He said, when you seduced women in the organization, were you being a Panther or a police officer? And she destroyed him. Understand? She destroyed him. Understand? And I believe, in a combination of other things, but I believe that cross-examination helped win that case. Yeah, thank you.